the virtual summit reflects the close ties that exist between India and Australia, as also the shared vision of both Prime Ministers to advance this bilateral partnership. Both the Prime Minister and Prime Minister Scott Morrison stressed on the high priority they attach to a bilateral relationship and the keen focus to enhance further the comprehensive strategic partnership between our two countries. You recall that the last summit, which was also held virtually between the two leaders, took place in June 2020. The summit today gave an opportunity for the two leaders to review the bilateral relationship in that intervening period, and to also take stock of the comprehensive strategic partnership framework, regular high-level engagements that have been held between the two countries. The leaders also recalled their previous meetings, including those held on the sidelines of the Quad Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C. in September last year, and on the sidelines of COP26 in Glasgow in November last year, where they jointly launched the Infrastructure for Resilient Island States, so IRIS, along with UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson. As you would recall, that this was a part of the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, the CDRI, and both Prime Ministers, along with the UK Prime Minister, were the co-chairs of this IRIS initiative that was launched by them together. Today's summit was held over an hour and covered the entire range of bilateral issues that were there before us. The wide-ranging discussions also covered regional and multilateral issues of interest. Prime Minister Modi indicated that as two democracies, India and Australia had similar goals and aspirations. Prime Minister Scott Morrison welcomed India's 2023 G20 presidency and reiterated Australia's commitment to work closely with us on economic issues of global interest and concern. The agenda of the meeting covered the status of various new initiatives and mechanisms agreed under the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. The Prime Ministers exchanged views on how COVID-19 had impacted across the globe and our respective responses and cooperation in critical areas such as health, vaccines, cyber, emerging technologies and supply chains. Incidentally, both Prime Ministers also gave a sense of what was done in our own countries. Prime Minister spoke about the fact that 90% of our adult population had been vaccinated. He also spoke about Vaccine Maitri and the vaccines that we had distributed to countries in our region and beyond, and also about the Quad vaccine partnership. This is an important initiative that involves both Australia and India as members of the Quad. The Australian Prime Minister also informed Prime Minister about their own vaccine initiatives and the successes that they've had in dealing with COVID-19. In a reiteration of for commitment to a progressive Indo-Pacific region, both leaders discussed calibrating and cooperating with each other on support to Pacific Island countries for humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, and in combating climate change through initiatives like the International Solar Alliance and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. The leaders exchanged perspectives about regional and multilateral matters and global issues of mutual interest, including shared concerns such as terrorism. You will, of course, see the joint statement soon, so some of this information would be contained in the joint statement concluded at the summit. Both leaders referred to their strong bilateral relationship as important not only from a bilateral perspective, but also, as I mentioned, under the Quad format, calling it a factor of stability in the Indo-Pacific. The Australian Prime Minister appreciated the significant presence of a large Indian diaspora in Australia. He stressed on the importance attached by Australia to its relations with India. I think there was a sense that Our cooperation had extended to sectors across the board. I think in particular in terms of investments, in terms of critical minerals, in terms of clean energy, in terms of water, agriculture. These were areas that both sides saw as highly potential. And I think there was a call for facilitating migration and mobility for students and professionals between the two countries. There was a sense between both Prime Ministers that two important areas in our partnership related to people-to-people contact, especially the youth, in terms of education and in terms of tourism exchanges between both our countries. Let me begin by saying that the two leaders exchanged views on important topical areas relating to our region and beyond. Obviously, the Ukraine issue was discussed, as was the issue of China. On Ukraine, I think it was clear that the two sides had referred to the Quad summit, in which the leaders had a fairly clear perspective that the situation in Ukraine should not impact on the Indo-Pacific, and that the focus and priority of the Indo-Pacific for the Quad and for our countries should continue to remain as they were. Prime Minister, I think Morrison was quite clear that as far as he was concerned, the Quad's focus was on the Indo-Pacific, and that he had made that clear at the Quad, and he has continued to emphasize that aspect in our discussions with us. He also, I think, expressed understanding for India's position on the issue of Ukraine, which he felt was definitely reflected our own situation, our own sort of considerations as far as the overall aspects of the discussion on Ukraine were concerned. I think there was a sense that there was concern, serious concern, you can say, about the ongoing conflict and the humanitarian situation in the Ukraine. This is something that both leaders clearly spoke about, and I think also the need for a cessation of hostilities and violence in that regard. I think there was equal emphasis on the fact that the international order stands on the UN Charter on the rule of law and respect for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of states. That aspect was also an area that both leaders very clearly emphasized. And of course, the humanitarian aspects of the situation, both in terms of allowing consideration for civilians, especially women and children, and also humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, was something that was clearly spoken about, and you will find that these are areas that are clearly there. But what I'm saying is that there was a clear sense of both sides understood where they came from, and I think there was a great deal of comfort in the fact that both of us saw the fact that the conflict in Europe should not be a reason for us to divert our attention from the Indo-Pacific region, and that our position as far as the Quad was concerned also was on similar lines.